on their study titled Missing Sharks, a country review of trade management regulations for listed shark species. I would recommend that all people interested in sharks have read of that very important document. We must bear in mind that illegal, unaudited and unregulated or IUU fishing remains a major global problem, estimated by FAO to be in the order of 11 to 26 million tonnes per year, worth 10 to 23 billion US dollars per year. So a significant part of the global total catch. This IUU catch of sharks will further heighten the mismatch between CITES trade figures and the actual volumes of CITES-listed sharks in trade. FAO's agreement on port state measures and its new guidance on catch documentation will help to combat IUU fishing, but CITES and its permitting systems can also assist. The Animals Committee noted the increased level of cooperation between CITES and FAO and growing positive relationships with RFMOs through various workshops and other initiatives led by CITES and also by the Government of Germany. The Animals Committee produced a series of draft decisions which are given in Annex 1 of Doc 65. These draft decisions and the responses to the notification 2021-16 were considered by the Standing Committee's Working Group on Sharks and Rays. The Standing Committee then prepared a series of draft decisions of their own, shown in Annex 2 to Doc 65, and with the Secretariat's help, the chairs of Animals Committee and Standing Committee working groups merged the two sets of decisions as shown in Annexes 3 and 4. So 3 is the combined and 4 is a clean version of that. Subsequently, in its comments on Doc 65, the CITES Secretariat has suggested major revisions to the combined set of decisions. Although some of the proposed changes incorporate recent developments, such as the publication of the traffic report on the missing sharks and reference to the September 22 Oxford workshop on legal acquisition findings, I believe that many of the proposed changes detract from what the Animals Committee and Standing Committee working groups had proposed. For example, the Secretariat proposes the deletion of Draft Decision 19 CC Roman R1, which invites parties to respond to a notification to the parties to share or update their experiences with the implementation of recent shark listings, including making NDFs, legal acquisition findings, tracking shark products through the supply chain, and dealing with stockpiles. Instead, the Secretariat expects parties to proactively share such experiences as provided for in Resolution Conf 12.6 on sharks. In my 12 years of chairing the Animals Committee's Working Group on Sharks, I don't think any party has proactively used this provision, but many parties and some external organisations have responded to similar notifications requesting such information. The Animals Committee was very careful to ask for concise reports from parties, because in the past we sometimes received 80 or more pages of material from parties, which we simply could not do justice to. Although Traffic's missing shark paper highlights a serious mismatch between CITES trade database and what CITES listed sharks are believed to be in international trade, especially through the introduction from the sea provisions of CITES, I believe that over the next 3 years we will need to continue to investigate the level and causes of mismatch, especially with more data now available on the international trade of mako sharks in particular. I fear that the best solution to resolve the differences between the merged draft decisions prepared by Animals Committee and Standing Committee and the Secretariat's very recent proposed changes to the draft decisions is to strike a working group at this meeting to consider the merits of the proposed changes and to come back to the meeting with a clean set of draft decisions. With your indulgence, Mr. Chair, I'd like to now give the floor to Mary Cogliano, Chair of the Standing Committee's Working Group on Sharks, for her perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. And yes, I hand the floor now to the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Robertson. I'll be happy to share my views as the Chair of the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group on Sharks and Rays. And on that note, I just want to clarify that I'll be speaking in that capacity rather than as a U.S. party at this time. First, though, before I get started, I'd like to give special thanks to the FAO for its valuable work related to the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group on Sharks and Rays and other work on this agenda item. Concerning implementation of Decision 18224, paragraphs 8 and A and B, the Standing Committee established an intersessional working group on sharks and rays with the mandate to develop guidance on the making of legal acquisition findings and related assessments for introduction from the sea for CITES listed shark species, and to develop new guidance or identify existing guidance on the control and monitoring of stockpiles of shark parts and derivatives. The membership of the working group included 23 parties and 13 observers. At its 74th meeting, the Secretariat, the Standing Committee reviewed the report of the Standing Committee Working Group on Sharks and Rays under document Standing 67.1, and the Standing Committee agreed to submit to COP19 the draft decisions put forward in that document, and they're therefore reflected here in the current document. I thank the Secretariat for its helpful comments on the draft decisions in this document, and note that in some cases, the edits do not align with the outcomes of the Standing Committee Intersessional Working on Sharks and Rays. For example, draft decision 19E, paragraph A and N4 to the document directs the Standing Committee guidance making of legal acquisition findings and related assessments for introductions from the sea for CITES listed shark species. The Secretariat has recommended deletion of this portion of the decision and to instead direct the Standing Committee to consider the outcomes of discussions from the September 22 Oxford workshop on legal acquisition findings instead of developing the guidance itself. I recognize the valuable work that progressed on this issue at the Oxford workshop, but I hesitate to remove the option of the Standing Committee developing more specific guidance targeting CITES listed shark species without concurrence from the Standing Committee. In addition, the Secretariat recommends deleting paragraph B of draft decision 19EE, which directs the Standing Committee to develop new guidance or identify existing guidance on the control and monitoring of stockpiles of shark parts and derivatives, in particular, specimens caught prior to the inclusion of the species in Appendix 2. I note that in the Standing Committee Intersessional Working Group deliberations, some parties stated the continued need for such guidance, and so I would hesitate to delete this part of the decision since it represents the opinions expressed by the Intersessional Working Group members. So in conclusion, I agree with Mr. Robertson that an in-session working group would help to reconcile the concerns related to the Secretariat's recommended edits to the draft decisions in this document. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
My thanks to both of you as chairs of the Animals Committee Working Group and of the Standing Committee Working Group, not only for your introduction, but for all the hard work that has gone into producing this document and all the work that has gone on behind it. And I hadn't realized that it had been 12 years for my colleague from New Zealand doing this task. You must have done something wrong in a previous existence, I think. And I'm also sorry that I disappointed you by not following the tradition, the precedent set by Rod Hay, your previous chair of Committee 1. But you haven't heard me sing, so I take your comments on board. I notice that you have both suggested that a working group here might be needed in order to kind of resolve a variety of different comments, and I think maybe that is where we will end up. But for now, I will open the floor for parties to make any comments they wish to, focusing on the recommended merged draft decisions in Annex 4 of document 65. So with that, I open the floor to parties. I see already Sri Lanka, followed by Panama.
Thank you, Chair. Sri Lanka is pleased to see this document and is encouraged by all the global efforts undertaken to implement the shark and ray listings. Our experience from Sri Lanka is that the CITES listings are complementing national efforts at increasing monitoring and regulation of the trade in sharks and rays, as well as creating synergies between fisheries and wildlife enforcement authorities. And we see this process as constructive for fisheries management and look forward to the successful listing of the Panama shark proposal on Appendix 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Panama. I now give the floor, thank you, Sri Lanka. I now give the floor to Panama, followed by the European Union.
Gracias, presidente. Panamá, al igual que Sri Lanka, agradece el esfuerzo para este documento y la nota de que la data no está de acuerdo en muchos casos. Para Panamá y para la mayoría de los países aquí presentes, el tema de tiburones y rayas es primordial en la agenda. Hablamos de áreas marinas protegidas que no son nada sin tiburones, que mantienen el equilibrio del ecosistema, que además mantienen el modo de vida de las comunidades costeras y pescadores artesanales. El tema de los datos es importantísimo para continuar tomando decisiones, pero es más importante aún para la implementación de estas decisiones y la implementación de los apéndices, como bien lo dice el documento. La data es preocupante por el tema de que todas son diferentes, pero la falta de los datos no debe ser excusa para no decidir sobre las especies ya en peligro o peligro crítico de extinción por la UICN, un organismo altamente reconocido y con más socios en el mundo. De igual forma que CITES muy bien cita el principio precautorio, término legal utilizado en todo el mundo también. Además de que el financiamiento para la toma de datos y estudios científicos es limitado, aunque según las Naciones Unidas es la década de investigación oceánica. De igual forma, decir que es un reto la implementación de los apéndices tampoco es válido para la toma de decisiones, ya que los retos siempre estarán y debemos trabajar en conjunto como convención internacional para poder eliminarlos, para eliminar la falta de datos y para integrar las especies en peligro de extinción en los apéndices de CITES, que aumenta inclusive más la trazabilidad y toma de datos para poder resolver este problema. Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Panama. I now give the floor to the European Union, followed by Gabon, and then the United States. So, EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. Thank you to the Standing Committee and the Animals Committee for preparing Working Document 65. We support this document and support the recommendations to adopt the draft decisions, 19AA to 19FF, contained in Annex 4 of the document, and are ready to participate in an in-session working group to discuss any draft decisions further. We have a suggestion for current draft decision 19BB, as long-term financing is key to provide the necessary support to implementation of listings of marine species. The actions in decision 19BB should not be subject to availability of external funding. We'd like to stress that. In addition, we would like to specifically support draft decision 19AAE, where it is suggested to consider seconding staff members with expertise in fisheries and the sustainable management of aquatic resources to the Secretariat. We would also like to stress how important the issue of traceability is, including the identification and monitoring of CITES-listed shark products in trade, in source, transit, and for consumer parties, as noted in 19CC and 19EE in Annex 4. Not only will close collaboration with custom authorities be needed, and possibly also with the World Customs Organization, but also budget for the work of the Secretariat, which seems to be missing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, EU. I now give the floor to Gabon, followed by the United States, then Bangladesh.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Gabon apprécie l'effort du Comité pour les animaux et du Comité permanent en consultation avec le Secrétariat pour la soumission du document COP19 DOC 65. Nous apprécions également le fait que les parties, grâce à des efforts régionaux et nationaux, ont fait d'énormes progrès dans la mise en œuvre des inscriptions de requins et de raies à la CITES. Le Gabon soutient de manière générale l'adoption des propositions de décision figurant à l'annexe 4 du document 65. Cependant, le Gabon ne peut soutenir les modifications apportées par le secrétariat, notamment en ce qui concerne le paragraphe C de l'article 19 BB. En effet, le secrétariat propose de supprimer le langage critique concernant le besoin continu de mener une étude sur le décalage apparent entre le commerce des produits de requins inscrits à la CITES, enregistrés dans la base de données sur le commerce de la CITES, et ce que l'on pourrait attendre des informations disponibles sur les prises d'espèces inscrites. Nous sommes d'accord avec le secrétariat sur le fait que l'analyse qualitative et préliminaire de trafic contenue dans le document SC 74 Inf Doc 24 constitue un excellent travail en confirmant qu'il existe une lacune importante dans la déclaration du commerce de requins inscrit à la CITES. Mais le rapport ne va pas assez loin. Il est impératif qu'une étude complète et exhaustive soit réalisée. Le temps presse. Il y a tout juste 5 jours, une étude publiée dans Science rapportait que le requin tendait vers une extinction depuis 70 ans, en grande partie à cause de l'absence de mesures de gestion visant à diminuer la pression de pêche sur les populations. En 2021, une étude publiée dans Current Biology a révélé que plus d'un tiers des requins, raies et chimères sont désormais menacés d'extinction sur la base des réévaluations de l'UICN portant sur 1199 espèces, ce qui en fait le deuxième groupe de vertébrés le plus menacé après les amphibiens. Et une étude publiée dans Nature en 2020 indique une disparition fonctionnelle des requins à hauteur de 20% des récifs étudiés. En ce moment critique, nous devons nous assurer que nous comprenons mieux le niveau substantiel du commerce des requins inscrit à la CITES, qui n'est pas reflété dans la base de données sur le commerce de la CITES. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Gabon. I'll give the floor to the United States, but I'd ask all parties, if they can, to keep their interventions brief and to keep them focused on Annex 4 and any changes you might want there, or as some parties have been doing already, reflecting on Secretariat comments. So, United States, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The United States welcomes this document, supports it, and stands ready to participate in a working group if one is struck. We would like to raise an additional issue that is not covered in the document. That is the continued challenges faced by parties in facilitating the transfer of scientific samples for CITES-listed sharks. As colleagues may recall, this issue had previously been raised at SC 69, where a decision was taken to discuss it as part of an intersessional working group on simplified procedures with the resulting recommendations adopted at COP 18. Unfortunately, based on our national experience and discussions with other delegations, we note that challenges remain regarding transfer of scientific samples for CITES-listed sharks. And these issues do not yet seem to have been addressed sufficiently by the discussions up to now. We would therefore propose that COP19 once again initiates a work stream to resolve challenges with regards to the transfer of scientific samples for shark specimens. We believe that such a work stream would be best directed to the Standing Committee with consultation of the Animals Committee, and are happy to work with other delegations in the working group if one is established to incorporate language to that effect in the draft decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I now give the floor to Bangladesh, followed by Mexico.
Thank you, Chair. Bangladesh appreciates the efforts of the Animal and Standing Committees in the preparation document 65 on sharks and rays. In September 2021, we amended the shark and ray species protected under our national law, informed by updated IUCN Red List assessments, CITES, and CMS listings. In the past year, we have conducted 4 non-detrimental finding assessments for CITES Appendix 2 listed smooth hammerhead and silky sharks, and the rhino and mobile rays in our waters. Given the high level of overfishing leading to most CITES-listed species occurring in our waters being highly threatened with extinction and they are being under national protection. The only positive NDF resulted for mature silky sharks. We also used the NDF process as a species risk assessment to inform improved fisheries and trade management of the black-tipped requiem shark complex not yet listed on CITES. We found that with improved monitoring of cases, landing, and trade, we could allow trade in this species. Our ability to improve compliance with CITES has greatly benefited from regional collaborations and international technical support, demonstrating effective implementation of existing sharks and rays listings. Given that sharks are under mandates of fisheries and wildlife or forest agencies, we would welcome more engagement of regional fisheries management organizations and alignments of effective, locally feasible management guidance. We therefore support the intention of the document and accept adoption of the version provided in Annex 4 or a further decision in a working group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bangladesh. I have now got Mexico on my speaking list. I think it's clear that, from the chairs of the respective Standing Committee and Animals Committee working groups, that there's probably a need to do some work here in a working group in order to perhaps reconcile some of the Secretariat comments with those in the with what is proposed in Annex 4, and also some parties have made some suggestions of additional text they would like to add. So I do intend to create a working group. We do have quite a few parties still asking for the floor. So in the understanding that there will be a working group in which you can participate, I think it would help us if you could keep your comments as brief as possible and maybe focused on the critical issue. But I now give the floor to Mexico, followed by the United Kingdom, then Peru. Mexico.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Para ser breve, México apoya los borradores de decisión recomendados por el Comité de Fauna 31 y el Comité Permanente 74, con las enmiendas que la Secretaría que buscan evitar duplicar actividades ya implementadas, asignadas a resoluciones ya existentes o que solicitaban reportes que ya se habían atendido. Adicionalmente, invitamos a las partes a revisar el documento informativo número 59, donde con gusto presentamos el libro Conservación, Uso y Aprovechamiento Sustentable de Tiburones Mexicanos listados en las CITES, cuyo objetivo es fortalecer la implementación del apéndice 2 para contar con la información científica para elaborar dictamen de extracción no perjudicial. La Autoridad Científica CITES de México, CONABIO, en conjunto con la Academia, a través del Centro de Investigación Científica y de Educación Superior de Ensenada, CICESE, y el Instituto Nacional de la Pesca, coordinaron 36 expertos mexicanos, quienes compilaron, analizaron e integraron información biológica y comercial sobre la normatividad y vulnerabilidad de 12 especies de tiburones listadas en el apéndice 2. Esta obra contribuye a la implementación de las decisiones 18.218 sobre tiburones y rayas y 18.134 sobre dictámenes de extracción no perjudicial, así como otros compromisos de México en el marco de las CITES. El libro ya está disponible para su descarga gratuita en español en el sitio de la Autoridad Científica de México y en el documento informativo número 59. Son más de 300 páginas muy interesantes que esperamos también sean de utilidad para otras partes. Y gracias y perdón por la intervención tan larga.
Thank you, Mexico. I give the floor now to the United Kingdom, followed by Peru and Japan. I'm closing the list now for parties. Somalia, you just made it into the end. So, United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As requested, I will keep this brief. The UK wants to recognise the ongoing work that supports the decisions in this document. We would like to use this opportunity to draw parties' attention to the UK's proposal under document 43.2, which seeks to improve this process through coordinated multi-party NDFs for straddling stocks caught in the high seas to support effective implementation of CITES-listed shark and ray species. The decisions in Working Document 65 will support more effective implementation and complement ongoing work in this area. We therefore support the decision in this document and would be happy to participate in a working group to discuss any further drafting changes. We would also note that many of these decisions could be incorporated into Resolution 12.6 as ongoing work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. And for your brevity, I now give the floor to Peru, followed by Japan, then Senegal. Peru.
Gracias, señor presidente. El Perú apoya los proyectos de decisión sobre los tiburones y rayas elaborados por el Comité Permanente, el Comité de Fauna, con las enmiendas de la Secretaría. Consideramos que las decisiones promoverán que las partes sigamos avanzando en las acciones de identificación, control y supervisión. Además, vale la pena resaltar la importancia de avanzar en las evaluaciones poblacionales de las especies con una mirada regional, así como el uso de criterios comunes para la elaboración de los dictámenes de extracción no perjudicial y el trabajo articulado con la FAO y las OROPS a fin de obtener mayor información para los dictámenes de extracción no perjudicial. Nos preocupa los altos volúmenes de desembarque que se vienen registrando de los tiburones zorros y son declarados por algunas partes como captura incidental. Es importante velar por la sostenibilidad de estas especies que cumplen un rol ecológico muy importante para la conservación del ecosistema marino. Consideramos que estas decisiones deberían aterrizar en planes de acción regionales que cuenten con financiamiento para propiciar la adecuada implementación de los tiburones en el apéndice 2 de las CITES. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Peru. Now give the floor to Japan, followed by the Senegal and the Congo.
Thank you, Chair. Japan basically supports the Secretariat comment to the Annex 4 of the document 65, but we have one comment. The Secretariat comment to the original paragraph C of 90.bb before the Secretariat amendment needed to be appropriately revised because it is inappropriate to the cite in the draft decision specific information document that have not been discussed and examined by the Animal Committee and the Standing Committee. Japan is not sure that the SC74 Info 24 was fully discussed and appropriately reminded the party members of it. Therefore, Japan would like to propose discuss about SC74 Info 24 in the next AC Animal Committee and the Standing Committee and mention it in the Secretariat amendment in the original paragraph C of the 90.bb. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Japan. And I give the floor now to Senegal, followed by the Congo, and then Tanzania.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Sénégal souscrit aux commentaires qui ont été faits par le Sri Lanka, le Panama et le Gabon. Je pense que le Gabon a même repris dans sa déclaration un point que nous avions souligné hier, qui dit que les requins constituent le second groupe de vertébrés le plus menacé de la planète. Et donc, il faut vraiment faire quelque chose pour sauver ces espèces. C'est ainsi qu'au niveau national, au Sénégal, nous travaillons à cela depuis très longtemps déjà, en mettant en place des aires marines protégées. Nous avons révisé notre loi pour intégrer spécifiquement les espèces de requins et de raies, pour mieux les prendre en charge, et pour mieux même anticiper sur les inscriptions. La loi a été révisée l'année dernière. Nous organisons au niveau national des ateliers avec l'appui de beaucoup de partenaires. Nous avons eu à effectuer un ACNP sur le Mako aussi. Tout ceci pour dire que le Sénégal est vraiment conscient de l'importance de la protection de ces espèces de requins et de raies et que le Sénégal va continuer dans ce sens-là. Au niveau sous-régional aussi, nous avons été appuyés par beaucoup de partenaires et beaucoup d'ateliers ont été réalisés pour la mise en œuvre. Parce que nous sommes conscients que l'inscription des espèces aux annexes est une chose, mais la mise en œuvre encore est une autre chose. Et donc si on fait ces efforts de mise en œuvre, c'est que c'est extrêmement important et que nous devons aller toujours dans ce sens-là pour mieux comprendre. Le problème de données se posera toujours de manière assez accrue, mais je pense que la coopération, la collaboration avec les différents groupes permettra de résorber ce problème. Nous en appelons aussi au secrétariat de faire un peu plus d'efforts parce que pratiquement tous les ateliers que nous parvenons à organiser, toutes les innovations que nous parvenons à mettre dans nos lois, c'est avec l'appui de certains partenaires et nous demandons vraiment que le secrétariat puisse venir en mon appui pour participer plus à cela. Donc c'est pour dire que la mise en œuvre est extrêmement importante et nous nous en attelons à cela au niveau national, mais aussi au niveau sous-régional. Et pour dire aussi que le Sénégal est prêt à participer au groupe de travail sur les mises en place. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Senegal. Final speakers will be the Congo, United Republic of Tanzania, and then Somalia. Congo, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je ne veux pas être long. La République du Congo est dans un processus de création d'aires marines protégées, et cela pour consolider la gestion durable de cette espèce. Et pour cela, le Congo salue tout le travail difficile contenu dans ce document sur la mise en œuvre de la CITES pour les espèces d'élasmobranchies. Il n'est pas exclu qu'il reste beaucoup à faire, mais il est évident que des progrès considérables ont été réalisés et donc la République du Congo est favorable à l'adoption des projets de décision consolidés dans l'annexe 4 du document 65 et à la création d'un groupe de travail. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. The Congo, I now give the floor to Tanzania, then Somalia.
Thank you, Chair. The United Republic of Tanzania congratulated the Standing Committee, Animal Committee, and the CITES Secretariat for the preparation of Document 65 on sharks and rays. Tanzania is in full support of the recommendation contained in this document, and for the interest of time, we will reserve our comment as we will be willing to be a part of the working group as indicated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and for your brevity. Also, Somalia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, to give me the floor for the issue of Document 65 for shark and rays. In Somalia, we have the second largest coast in Africa, and we have a concern shark and rays are risky, and they need protection to be aware for extinction. We know there is illegal trade in the international sea. For that reason, we support the document to save the species and put in a safe place. Thank you.
Thank you, Somalia, and that concludes the list of parties. I will try and give the opportunity for a couple of observers to speak, but recognizing I am going to create a working group. So if there are any observers that wish to take the floor, I see only two requests. If you could keep your remarks very brief. So I go first to SPREP and then Sea Shepherd Legal. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The Secretariat for the Pacific Regional Environment Programme is the IGO who supports Pacific parties with environmental advice and support. There are significant challenges for our Pacific parties associated with implementing shark decisions and listings. Capacity building support is critical for successful implementation. We would like to support the suggestion by the EU that paragraph 19BB(a), which says, continue to provide capacity building assistance for implementing Appendix 2 shark and ray listings to parties upon request, should not be subject to external funding. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sprep. I give the floor to Sea Shepherd Legal, then IWMC, and that's it. For observers, please keep your remarks very brief, please. Sea Shepherd Legal, you have the floor.
Test. Sorry. Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time Sea Shepherd Legal is taking the floor, we would like to thank the Government of Panama for hosting this important COP and the hospitality extended. This intervention is made on behalf of 17 organizations. I will provide a full list to the Secretariat. We welcome the document that has been submitted by the Standing Committee and Animals Committee on Agenda Item 65 on sharks and rays. We would, however, also like to take the opportunity to express our concern that little to no progress has been reported on two decisions directed to the Secretariat, namely the study on the apparent mismatch between CITES recorded trade and information on catches of listed species, Decision 18.221, and capacity building assistance to parties for the implementation of listings 18.219. On Decision 18.221, we value the insightful study that has been conducted by Traffic, made available in SC 74 INF 24, that provides some qualitative insights and provides a useful starting point. But as the delegate of Gabon, we would like to see that the original requested study by the Secretariat, currently proposed to be renewed as Decision 19BBC, be implemented promptly. On capacity building, as previous speakers, we are heartened and thank parties and other stakeholders for their significant efforts at the national and regional level to provide capacity building independent of Decision 18.219. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Sea Shepherd Legal. IWMC, you have the floor. Again, I ask you to be brief so that we can set up the working group and move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the presentation is made on behalf of several organizations represented here in the meeting. During this standing committee meeting, we were informed of the several countries which have been in default of coping with their responsibilities under the convention, under the decisions taken by the Conference of the Parties. I have one simple question about this document. Looking at it, how the small island nations and the small fishing communities will be able to cope with all of the requirements that we have in there. The previous speakers have indicated that already on previous decisions, there have been very serious shortage in implementation. And I'm afraid that what we could do with this decision could be to simply add up more countries on the list of those failing their responsibility under CITES. Thank you, Chair.
WMC. Just one moment, please, and then I'll set up the working group. Right, so we have decided I have decided to set up a working group. There's a lot to discuss. So if parties now wish to press the button, and as soon as your name is read out, then please press your button again so that you're removed from the list. And I begin. I see Israel, United States, Germany, New Zealand, UK, Bahamas, Tanzania, Senegal, Guatemala, Gabon, Sweden, Peru, Canada, Sierra Leone, Panama, Maldives, Malaysia, European Union, Mozambique, Honduras, Australia, Sri Lanka, Japan, Singapore, Ecuador, Indonesia, Czech Republic, Samoa, Argentina, Côte d'Ivoire, Namibia, Comoros, Mauritania, China, Somalia, Netherlands, Laos, People's Democratic Republic, and then Mali, and Costa Rica, and Thailand, Antigua and Barbuda, and Cambodia. I think that concludes the list of parties. So if observers would like to press their buttons. I see Save Foundation, SPREP, Law of the Wild, Florida International University, I think, Oceana, HSI, Shark Conservation Fund, I4, WWF, ZSL, IUCN, Erasmo Project, FAO, Blue Resources Trust, is that? Shark Advocacy International, Sea Shepherd Legal, Traffic, WCS, International Coalition on Fisheries, PADI, AZA, Defenders of Wildlife, Fondation Franz Weber, IWMC, and Earth Trust International, and that is it. We just have to do some quick sums here to make sure that, oh, I now see Defenders of Wildlife again. I think I've already read your name out, and I saw IATTC and Mar Viva. Right, so that's it now. List closed for observation. So the numbers work out fine there, about 42 parties, we think, and about 27 observers. The Gambia, sorry, did you have a problem with your button? Okay, well, we can add the Gambia, I think, to the list, but if there's a problem with your microphone, then maybe we can get a technician to look at it, or, okay. Guinea. Guinea, have you requested the floor? Did you have a problem with your microphone, or are you a late entrant? No? Microphone. You can have the floor.
Bonjour, c'était pour enregistrer le pays. J'ai eu des problèmes pour l'enregistrement.
So I think what's happening, there's a blank row on the screen that is maybe the missing party there. So, Brazil. Is that Brazil? Okay. You were attempting to join the working group? Okay, we'll add you, Brazil.
Yes, Brazil would like to attend the working group. Thank you.
Okay, we will add you to the list. Oh, no. And El Salvador, where's El Salvador? Were you also wanting to be included and had microphone problems, or? Yes. Okay. Okay, so a few additional parties there which seem to have had problems with the microphone. And Guinea, again, did we add Guinea earlier? Yeah, I think we've got you, Guinea, so. Okay, Kenya? Did we have Kenya? Okay, but I think we have to start drawing a line here. Benin, okay, right. So no more, please. We've had lots of time to press your button, so no more late entries. We need to kind of move on. So for the working group, I suggest the terms of reference for the working group are the Working Group on Sharks and Rays, Elasmobranchii species, shall revise the merged decisions in Annex 4 to CoP19.65, taking into account the comments and amendments made in Committee 1 and the Secretariat's comments also. So that will be the broad terms of reference. With their indulgence, I will ask again if long-standing chairs from New Zealand and the United States, who have done a kind of valiant job for their respective animals and standing committees, would be willing to chair this working group. And so with their approval, then we will close this agenda item for now, and we will post arrangements of the working group as soon as we can. One moment. So we now move on to item 80 on the agenda, and CoP19.80 on marine ornamental fishes. This document submitted by the Animals Committee, and I believe the chair of the Animals Committee is going to introduce it. So we can give the microphone to Switzerland, please. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This document has been submitted by the Animals Committee. At its 18th meeting, the Conference of the Parties adopted decisions 18296 to 18298 on marine ornamental fishes. They were directed to the Secretariat, the Animals Committee, as well as parties, the owners, and other organizations. The decisions to the parties had the intention to convene a technical workshop to consider the conservation priorities and management needs related to the trade in data from importing and exporting countries, with the participation of the Animals Committee, representatives from range states, exporting and importing countries, fisheries stakeholder, industry representative, and relevant intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations. In preparation of the workshop, it was considered to contract specialists to establish documents on marine ornamental fishes biology, conservation status, trade and management, applicable trade regulations, and enforcement. The Animals Committee was then to analyze the results of that workshop and make recommendations to COP as appropriate. However, the COVID pandemic and partial lack of funding slowed down the whole process for implementing the decisions on marine ornamental fishes, and not all activities could be finalized. However, some progress could be made, in particular in relation to the preparation of documents for the planned workshop. The Secretariat, with financial support from the EU, United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and Switzerland, contracted WCMC to write these documents. WCMC then reached out to parties and interested organizations with a questionnaire to gather information on non-CITES listed live marine ornamental fish. The Secretariat also noted IUCN had secured funding from Switzerland to complete red list assessment for bony fish species found in the ornamental marine fish trade that are not already assessed in the red list. In light of the unfinished work in the implementation of the decisions, the Animals Committee was of the view that part of the mandates articulated in these decisions need to be extended beyond CoP19. A second piece of work was in relation to Banggai cardinal fish. There, the Animals Committee considered the responses from Indonesia on the decision 18263 on Banggai cardinal fish. The committee acknowledged the current status of the Banggai cardinal fish as a non-CITES listed species and, referring to significant progress achieved by Indonesia, encouraged Indonesia to continue its work to promote the conservation, management, and sustainable trade in Banggai cardinal fish, and to present this case to the technical workshop on marine ornamental fishes envisaged under Decision 18296. The Conference of Parties is there invited to adopt the draft decision presented in Annex 1 and delete decisions 18263 to 18265. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair of the Animals Committee, for that introduction and the recommendation to adopt the draft decisions in Annex 1. So with that, not only to adopt the draft decisions in Annex 1, but to delete decisions 18263 to 265. So with that, I open the floor for comments from parties. So, okay, I see the United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The UK thanks the Animals Committee for submitting this document. The UK aligns with the Secretariat's comments on this document in recognising the vital role that industry contributes to addressing this task. To help achieve this, we think it is essential to develop a clear terms of reference for the proposed workshop. To ensure this is captured in the document, we propose the addition of a decision directed at the Animals Committee, 19BB a, which reads, "The Animals Committee shall agree a terms of reference for the technical workshop." To assist in providing clarity for the aims and outcomes of the workshop and supporting the drafting of terms of reference, we have submitted Information Document 69, which could be used as a starting point for these. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK, and for that amendment, which I think we have captured. But perhaps you could just read it one more time, just to make sure that everybody in the room has got the wording correctly, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so it will be 19BB a, which reads, the Animals Committee shall agree a terms of reference for the technical workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, UK. With that amendment, I don't see any more requests for the floor from parties. So if there are none, I will look to our observers for any comments. I see first IUCN and then the ornamental, so IUCN, WCMC, then the Ornamental Aquatic Trade Association. So IUCN, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. This intervention is given on behalf of IUCN. IUCN would like to highlight the recent updates to the IUCN Red List for marine ornamental bony fish. Of the 2,690 marine ornamental bony fish identified in a recent assessment, 2,100 species have already been assessed, published on the IUCN Red List, and a further 445 species were recently assessed and will be published in the Red List update in December. A further 145 species remain to be assessed. These additional Red List assessments represent a key step forward in increasing our knowledge of the conservation status of marine ornamental bony fish species in trade. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IUCN. I now give the floor to WCMC.
Thank you, Chair. UNEP WCMC was asked by the CITES Secretariat to compile the thematic studies on marine ornamental fish referred to in document 80. We would like to take this opportunity to thank those parties, as well as representatives from the trade and other non-governmental organisations who provided input to the online survey circulated via notification to the parties number 2021-30. The draft thematic studies, based on the results of the survey as well as other sources, have been submitted to the Secretariat for publication as an information document. These thematic studies provide a starting point for discussion, and we stand ready to support the next steps contained within the draft decisions in Annex 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, WCMC. I now give the floor to the Ornamental Aquatic Trade Association. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on your election to Chair of this committee. For this intervention, I'm speaking on behalf of the Ornamental Fish International, the European Pet Organisation, the Sustainable Users Network, and a number of other pet trade and keeping organisations. We support the proposals made to progress this work and hope that adequate time is given to this work stream to ensure that good data and evidence is available and that outputs are not rushed to deliver to overly enthusiastic timelines. We support the proposal of the UK that the Animals Committee considers the developments of terms of reference for the plans workshop and support the draft proposed text in Information Document 69. We're very grateful to have been invited to engage in the development of the thematic studies being prepared by UNEP WCMC. This work has demonstrated to us some of the inherent weaknesses in the wide range of data sets available, both official and modelled, and the importance of engaging industry stakeholders to ensure good quality, real-world data in order to avoid poor future decisions. In this regard, we consider the Information Document 68 from the UK on marine ornamental fish in trade demonstrates that good quality real-world data is available and readily accessible. The approach outlined in this document has shown good correlation with industry data, and we believe it should form an important component of CITES considerations in this work programme. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Owata. Just one moment, please. Okay, there are no further requests from the floor. So I think we are happy to adopt as a recommendation from this committee the draft decisions in Annex 1, including the addition from the United Kingdom. I was just checking with the Secretariat to make sure that we also agree and delete the right decisions as well. So I think on that basis, we would delete decisions 18263 to 265, and also 18296 to 298 because they are now replaced. So with that, I think we can close this agenda item and move on to the start of our what would have been the start of our program this morning, which is document 20 on the CITES Tree Species Program, and I invite the Secretariat to introduce that.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. It is an honor and a pleasure for me to introduce document CoP19.20 on the CITES Tree Species Program, also known as the CTSP. The document provides a summary of the progress in the implementation of the 20 projects funded by the CTSP and implemented in 23 parties. All projects are now complete or near complete, and the results of the projects are significant and concrete. Under the program, parties have been accompanied in the development of NDFs for selected tree species and populations, strengthening their capacity to carry out NDFs in other areas and for other tree species. The NDFs and the experience gained in this project will feed into the NDF project that will be discussed under item 43.1 later this week. Parties have produced identification materials, including apps and guidance documents, and provided training to foresters and enforcement officers to use this material in their work. New species have been discovered in Guatemala. Seedlings have been planted in Burundi, Cambodia, Cote d'Ivoire, and awareness of the importance and value of listed tree species has been raised among policymakers and local communities. And I could go on and on. More details have been provided in information document number 43. And all the results are available on the CTSP website in the language they were produced. We will also translate some of the products to disseminate them further and make them available to other parties. The funding of 7 million euros provided by the European Union in 2017 to the CTSP is coming to an end. However, many parties have expressed interest and need for continued support, also in light of the proposals for inclusion of additional tree species in Appendix 2 put forward at this meeting. This was a very clear message from the closing meeting of the EU-funded project that took place in October in Malaysia, with the participation of all the project coordinators, as well as from the advisory committee of the CTSP. The Secretariat has therefore initiated consultations with the International Tropical Timber Organization, ITTO, the European Union, and other potential partners on the continuation of the program beyond this year, and we welcome any further interest in this discussion by potential donors and partners. The Secretariat considers that a continuation of the CTSP should be structured around 3 pillars reflecting the structure of the Convention. These are regulation and governance, sustainability of the trade, and identification, traceability, and marking. Engagement of local and rural communities, gender mainstreaming, and capacity building would be cross-cutting through the program that would be fully aligned with the CITES priorities as expressed through resolutions and decisions. Mr. Chair, before I conclude, I would like to express the sincere gratitude of the Secretariat to the donor, the partner agencies, the regional coordinators, and in particular, to all the parties for their hard work in making this happen. Turning to the recommendations of the Secretariat, the Conference of the Parties is invited to take note of the report of the Secretariat, adopt 2 new decisions contained in Annex 1 of the document, and to delete decisions 18.14 to 18.17 as these have been implemented. Mr. Chair, this concludes my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretariat, for that very positive introduction in terms of what's been achieved under this CITES Tree Species Program, and thank you also to the donors. So with that, I open the floor for comments. Again, I always ask you to focus on what we're being asked to decide here, and to look in particular at the draft decisions and any comments you may have on those. So with that, I see on my list, I give the floor to Benin, followed by the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and then Malaysia. So Benin, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais saluer ici donc, tout l'engagement du secrétariat par rapport à ce programme dont le Bénin a bénéficié. Je voudrais donc juste dire ici que c'était une très belle expérience pour permettre à des pays comme le Bénin d'avoir la capacité de renforcer donc la capacité des autorités scientifiques à s'essayer à l'élaboration des avis de commerce non préjudiciables. Comme vous le savez, la plupart de nos pays n'ont pas la capacité ni les ressources nécessaires pour pouvoir élaborer ces documents essentiels. Donc, une fois qu'il y a des inscriptions au niveau de la CITES, nos pays se trouvent donc en difficulté pour mettre en œuvre donc, convenablement la Convention. Donc, nous soutenons les décisions qui ont été proposées par la CITES et c'est ce que je tenais à dire ici au nom du Bénin. Merci.
Thank you, Benin. I now give the floor to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, followed by Malaysia, then Indonesia.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de la parole. Comme mon pays intervient pour la première fois dans notre comité, je commence par remercier les autorités du Panama pour leur hospitalité. Et je remercie également le secrétariat pour avoir préparé tous les aspects logistiques et techniques liés à cette conférence. Je vous remercie également, Monsieur le Président, de la manière dont vous conduisez les débats et vous rassure ma coopération. Alors, je commence par remercier également l'Union européenne qui a daigné financer ce programme parce que mon pays est parmi les bénéficiaires de ce programme et a pu réaliser 3 avis de commerce non préjudiciables de Pericopsis elata, de Gibus et de Meusé et de Prunus africana. Je remercie également le secrétariat, particulièrement Madame Sophie Flensbock qui a daigné coordonner ce programme. Je remercie également Dr Lagarde Betty pour avoir suivi ce programme au niveau de notre région et il nous a facilité dans le suivi et la mise en œuvre. Et je soutiens les recommandations contenues dans cette décision, dans ce projet. Et je soutiens ces recommandations et je plaide pour la poursuite de ce programme. C'est la poursuite, pour cela je demande encore aux donateurs de pouvoir appuyer, surtout pour assurer le suivi des acquis réalisés par les programmes passés et surtout pour intégrer les nouvelles espèces des arbres qui vont être inscrites aux annexes de la CITES. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Democratic Republic of the Congo. I now give the floor to Malaysia, followed by Indonesia and Cuba.
Mr. Chair, my delegation would like to thank the CITES Secretariat for preparing the document CoP19, document 20 on the CITES 3 species program, and especially to Ms. Sophie, the CITES 3 Species Program CTSP coordinator for her excellent efforts in implementing this small grant program to the rest of the CTSP team for their continuous support. We will also take the opportunity to express our sincerest thanks to the European Union and the CITES Secretariat for supporting the Malaysian project entitled Establishment of Arboreta and Strengthening Institutional Network for the Conservation of Aquileria malicensis in Peninsular Malaysia. This project, which had completed by the Forest Research Institute Malaysia in 2020, will further enhance the management and conservation of the threatened Aquileria malicensis in Malaysia. Intergovernmental collaborations concerning research and management of the species had seen improvement in Malaysia. We participated in that the genetic conservation of Aquileria malicensis in Malaysia would be better achieved as one of its outcomes. Mr. Chair, Malaysia has conducted 14 projects under the ITTO CITES program since 2008, and it is important that Malaysia continues to engage in research and capacity building in a longer term. At the CTSP regional meeting for Asia in 2018, and the recently conducted CTSP international closing meeting in 2020 in Kuala Lumpur, we and the other participating countries have voiced the need that CTSP should continue into its second phase. In this respect, we stress that parties need longer-term, coherent and comprehensive technical and financial support to enhance capacities to implement the convention. Therefore, Malaysia wishes to strongly support the adoption of the draft decisions as contained in Annex 1 of the CoP19 document 20 in order to consider continuing the program in the future. We look forward to work closely with the CITES Secretariat to ensure the success of future programs. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Malaysia. I now give the floor to Indonesia, followed by Cuba and Guatemala.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Indonesia would like to thank the Secretariat for preparing the documents, and we also thank the European Union and the CITES Secretariat for supporting the CTSP Indonesia. Indonesia has completed the activities with the main finding that the export of Dalbergia latifolia from Java is non-detriment, and the harvest comes from location categorized as a source code A and Y. This program has contributed greatly to forest management of Dalbergia latifolia in Indonesia, and we believe for many countries also that have implemented the CTSP. Hence, we support the continuation of the CTSP program. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia. I give the floor to Cuba, then Guatemala, then the United States.
Gracias, señor presidente. Cuba ha sido beneficiada con el proyecto del programa de especies arbóreas y estamos muy agradecidos por esta colaboración. Nuestro proyecto tuvo varias dificultades para su implementación, los fondos depositados en marzo de 2020, justamente con el inicio de la pandemia en nuestro país. Las medidas sanitarias implementadas en Cuba impidieron la ejecución de las actividades previstas en el proyecto, que solo pudo iniciarse al final del 2021. Por lo que lo que teníamos previsto realizar en 18 meses, hubo que realizarlos en solo 8 meses. Nos dedicamos entonces a priorizar las actividades más importantes que fueron cumplimentadas, como la elaboración de los DEM de 2 especies de guayacanes y las actividades de cooperación, de capacitación y de reforzamiento del control del comercio ilícito. Por ello, a pesar de no haber podido utilizar todos los fondos previstos, podemos asegurarles que avanzamos significativamente en el conocimiento de los guayacanes, de Guayacum santum y Guayacum officinalis, en el país, y en la implementación de CITES en Cuba para especies arbóreas. Por todo ello, queremos agradecer a la Secretaría y a la Unión Europea como donante por esta iniciativa tan importante y necesaria. Nos gustaría que el programa pudiera continuar en el futuro. Alentamos entonces a las partes a aportar fondos, incluso al sector privado que tanto se beneficia del comercio de la madera y su gestión sostenible de las especies. Por todo ello, apoyamos los proyectos de decisión que están previstos y recogen en el anexo 1 del documento 20. Gracias.
Thank you, Cuba. I give the floor to Guatemala, followed by the United States, then the European Union.
Gracias, señor presidente. Por ser la primera vez que Guatemala interviene en esta sala, queremos felicitarle por su nombramiento y le deseamos todos los mejores éxitos para la conducción de este comité. Así también queremos agradecer al gobierno de Panamá por haber acogido esta reunión y por el excelente recibimiento que hemos tenido de parte de ellos. Con respecto al programa de las CITES para las especies arbóreas, Guatemala quiere expresar su agradecimiento tanto a la Secretaría de las CITES como a los donantes por estas importantes contribuciones. Guatemala ha financiado procesos de investigación bastante oportunos que han permitido a la autoridad científica mejorar la formulación de los dictámenes de extracción no perjudicial para las especies del género Dalbergia. A partir de estos procesos de investigación se han determinado 2 nuevas especies de dalbergia para Guatemala y se han reforzado los mecanismos de identificación de maderas. Esto es fundamental para una efectiva implementación. Además, también hemos sido parte de un proyecto trinacional junto con El Salvador y Nicaragua, con quienes entre los productos más destacables podemos decir que ahora tenemos una estrategia regional que nos va a permitir explorar a futuro los avances en implementación de las CITES para las especies arbóreas y también se formularon dictámenes de extracción no perjudicial para Dalbergia retusa. En concordancia con lo dicho por Congo, Malasia, Indonesia y Cuba, creemos que este programa debería de continuar. En tal sentido, estamos de acuerdo con el proyecto de decisión, pero queremos agregar al inciso B del proyecto de decisión lo siguiente: solicitará asesoramiento y orientación a los comités de flora y permanente para evaluar la posibilidad de que el programa de las CITES para las especies arbóreas sea un programa permanente y en tal sentido formular recomendaciones para que podamos contar con un mecanismo que ayude a todas las partes en las CITES para la implementación de este reto tan importante que es las especies arbóreas. En tal sentido, también es importante mencionar que en esta conferencia de las partes vamos a tener propuestas que implican la inclusión de más de 200 especies nuevas a los listados de CITES. Esto justifica aún más lo dicho por Congo, Malasia, Indonesia, Cuba y ahora Guatemala, de contar con un programa permanente de apoyo a los países en la implementación de CITES para las especies arbóreas. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Guatemala, but you proposed some alternative text there. It would be helpful to us if you could perhaps repeat that more slowly to make sure that we can capture that. And I repeat my request to everybody, in fact, that if you are intending to propose some textual changes, that you try to give those to us in advance so that we make sure that we get the wording correctly. So if you could, Guatemala, just repeat the text. Thank you.
Gracias, señor presidente. Sí, la propuesta de redacción va para la decisión 19BB, inciso B, en donde la propuesta es solicitará asesoramiento y orientación a los comités de flora y permanente para evaluar la posibilidad de que el programa de las CITES para las especies arbóreas sea un programa permanente y eso sería, señor presidente. Gracias.
Thank you, Guatemala, for that. So we've captured that. I'll now give the floor to the United States of America, followed by the European Union and Norway. US, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports adoption of the draft decision 19.AA in Annex 1 to document CoP19.20. With regard to draft decision 19.BB, we do not support the development of a capacity building program covering all relevant regions on the implementation of CITES for tree species included in the appendices and forests at this time, because we think it's premature and would need additional consideration. However, we support adoption of the remaining elements of draft decision 19.BB. We also believe that draft decision 19.BB should be amended to include an instruction directing the Secretariat to report progress made with the implementation of the CITES tree species program to the Plants Committee and to the Standing Committee. Additionally, we propose a further draft decision as follows: directed to the Standing Committee and the Plants Committee. The Standing Committee shall, in consultation with the Plants Committee, Evaluate the need for the development of a capacity building program covering all relevant regions on the implementation of CITES for tree species included in the appendices and forests. If appropriate, develop terms of reference for such a program, and provide its recommendations to the Conference of the Parties at its 20th meeting. Finally, the United States is pleased to share that we announced at the recent ITTO Council session a pledge of $125,000 US to support ITTO CITES cooperation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United States. But again, it would be helpful, I think, if you could just repeat your suggested additions one more time to make sure we've got them correctly. That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the additional draft decision that we are suggesting would be directed to the Standing Committee and the Plans Committee. And it would read, the Standing Committee shall, in consultation with the Plans Committee, evaluate the need for the development of a capacity building program covering all relevant regions on the implementation of CITES for tree species included in the appendices and forests. If appropriate, develop terms of reference for such a program and provide its recommendations to the Conference of the Parties at its 20th meeting.
Okay, thank you, United States. I think we've captured that. So European Union, followed by Norway, then Nicaragua. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the EU and its member states, I would like to thank the Secretariat for the report and also for its effort in managing the tree species program. We support the draft decisions as proposed by the Secretariat. We take note of the progress made and we wish to stress the importance of continued support to the implementation of the Convention for listed tree species. The EU has contributed €7 million over the past 5 years, and we are currently exploring options to provide additional support in the future. We would like to invite parties to contribute or continue contributing financially to the program in the next intersessional period as well. Thank you.
Thank you, EU. I now give the floor to Norway, followed by Nicaragua, then Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. As this is the first time Norway takes the floor, we would like to thank the government and people of Panama for welcoming us, and the Secretariat for preparing and organizing the meeting. We would also like to congratulate you on your appointment as chair of this committee. Norway thanks the Secretariat for its submission of CoP19 Doc 20. We support the work done by CITES Tree Species Program and the collaboration with other organizations such as the FAO and others. Norway would also like to emphasize the importance of initiatives such as the UN RED initiative for the sustainable forest trade in the lower Mekong and their effort to strengthen forest governance and to ensure that trading of wood product is legal and sustainable. Norway therefore supports the adoption of the decisions as found in Annex 1 and the deletion of decisions 18.14 to 18.17. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Norway. I now give the floor to Nicaragua, then Brazil.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Nicaragua fue parte del proyecto Generación de Capacidades y Lineamientos Técnicos de Manejo para elaborar dictámenes de extracción no perjudicial orientados a las especies del género de albergue en Guatemala, El Salvador y Nicaragua, realizado en el marco del programa de la CITES sobre especies arbóreas, generándose una serie de instrumentos a nivel nacional y internacional que han fortalecido el manejo forestal para asegurar en nuestros países el aprovechamiento sostenible de estas especies y la elaboración de los dictámenes de extracción no perjudicial. Agradecemos el apoyo recibido de la Secretaría, OIMT y la Unión Europea y hacemos un llamado a continuar apoyando estas iniciativas que fomentan el manejo sostenible y la conservación de las especies arbóreas del género Albergia. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Nicaragua. Now give the floor to Brazil, to be followed by Côte d'Ivoire and El Salvador. Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. Brazil has an important role on the conservation of native vegetation, but also to maintain the sustainable production of timber in our forests, especially on the Amazon biome, a territory that occupies about 52% of our entire country, home of 28 million Brazilians. For a long date, Brazil has been implementing sustainable forest management enterprises to support local and foreign timber demand, respectively 91% local and 9% for exports in terms of volume of sawn woods, among others. Using data from National Timber Productions Information Systems, IBAMA, the Federal Environmental Agency of Brazil, reported that 2% in area of the Amazon biome has already sustainable forest management license projects, 97,000 square kilometers, both in private traditional communities or public forest areas. Production of 87% of logged trees, around 8 million cubic meters per year, comes from sustainable forest management. To achieve this scenario, many work has been done throughout the past 4 decades, and many contributions from experts of ITTO, CIFOR, FAO, among other institutions, were very important. We invite parties and observers to visit the website of IBAMA and search for the analytical panel on timber production for more information. CTSP implemented in Brazil 2 important projects developing near-infrared spectroscopy technology for identification of dalbergia and mahogany products and rosewood oil. Those projects were developed in the Laboratory of Forest Products, and their products are already in use by the enforcement of environmental agency, both in production areas and harbors where exploitation occurs. According to the lessons learned, highlighted at paragraph 34 of the document, we believe that we have potential and capacity to continue to develop same or other analytical techniques for timber identification and traceability, promoting capacity building and technological transfer, even for eventually new listing of tree species in Appendix 2, or still concerned listed species, as Pau Brasilia equinata, our Pau Brazil. We are very thankful for the Secretariat cooperation and for the funding, and we support the draft decision following United States suggestion on capacity building. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brazil. I now give the floor to Côte d'Ivoire, who will be followed by El Salvador and then Argentina.
Monsieur le Président, prenant la parole pour la première fois dans ce comité, la Côte d'Ivoire voudrait vous féliciter pour votre élection et vous assurer de sa totale coopération dans la conduite de nos travaux. La Côte d'Ivoire voudrait également féliciter le gouvernement du Panama pour toutes les dispositions qui ont été prises en vue du bon déroulement de cette conférence. Monsieur le Président, la Côte d'Ivoire voudrait féliciter et remercier le secrétariat de la CITES ainsi que tous ses partenaires et bailleurs qui ont contribué à la mise en place du programme CITES sur les espèces d'arbres et à son excellente exécution. Monsieur le Président, la Côte d'Ivoire a bénéficié du financement d'un projet dans ce programme et nous vous en remercions infiniment, ainsi que les initiateurs. Les acquis incommensurables de ce programme mettent en relief le besoin impérieux de soutenir les pays des aires de répartition dans la mise en œuvre des inscriptions à l'annexe 2 de la CITES. Monsieur le Président, la Côte d'Ivoire, par conséquent, en appelle à tous les pays de consommation ou de destination de soutenir les pays d'origine dans la mise en œuvre des inscriptions à l'annexe 2 en mettant en place des fonds de soutien ou en développant des programmes comme celui-ci. Pour terminer, nous soutenons les projets de décision du secrétariat. J'ai dit merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Côte d'Ivoire. I'm just looking at my list. I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I've got 10 more parties wanting to take the floor. I'm closing the list now. I would ask the remaining parties, to be very brief. I know people are very keen to talk about the kind of successful projects and the benefits that have come from this CITES tree species program. But we are running behind on time, so I would ask you for brevity, please, and perhaps to focus on the draft decisions in Annex 1 and the suggested amendments to them and whether you support those or not. So with that, I'll then continue. I'll give the floor to El Salvador, to be followed by Argentina and Peru.
Gracias. Muy buenos días a todos. Es la primera vez que El Salvador hace una intervención. Agradecemos la oportunidad. Felicitamos a Panamá por dirigir tan exitosamente la COP. Señor Presidente, desearle éxitos en sus nuevas gestiones. Queremos expresar que El Salvador forma parte de este proyecto. Estamos agradecidos con las CITES por el apoyo al programa sobre especies arbóreas, el cual nos ayuda a adoptar medidas de conservación y gestión para garantizar que el comercio de madera, corteza, extractos y otros especímenes de especies arbóreas incluidas en las CITES sea sostenible, legal y trazable. Este proyecto estuvo lleno de retos y desafíos, pero con mucho conocimiento científico generado. Sin embargo, aún quedan muchos retos. Se requiere dar continuidad al programa, por lo que la asistencia financiera a las partes es de gran importancia para garantizar el seguimiento. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, El Salvador. I give the floor to Argentina, followed by Peru. And again, a request for brevity, please. Thank you.
Gracias, señor presidente. Argentina, quisiera agradecer la excelente organización de este programa por parte de la Secretaría CITES y el financiamiento de la Unión Europea. A nosotros nos ha sido muy beneficioso participar de él. Nosotros aplicamos para el trabajo con Gonopterodendron sarmientoi, una especie del centro norte de nuestro país, y ha sido muy beneficioso. También Argentina aboga por la continuidad de este proyecto. Sería muy importante para nosotros poder hacer extensivo todo lo aprendido al resto de los países del área de distribución, con lo cual pensamos que la continuidad de este programa sería vital para nosotros. Lo mismo hemos manifestado en el taller que hubo para los resultados en Kuala Lumpur. Desde ya, muchas gracias. Y perdón, apoyamos los proyectos de decisión con las modificaciones que planteó la República de Guatemala. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Argentina. I now give the floor to Peru, followed by Burundi.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. En primer lugar, deseo agradecer a la Secretaría por la elaboración del documento que relata los avances alcanzados por el programa, así como todo el esfuerzo realizado para su implementación, tanto por la Secretaría como las partes que participaron y a los países cooperantes. El Perú no fue uno de los países beneficiarios del programa, dado que nuestras especies no se encontraron priorizadas, pero reconocemos la vital importancia de contar con el apoyo. Fortalecer las capacidades de las partes para los dictámenes de extracción no perjudicial, marcado y trazabilidad, identificación y mejora de capacidad para la gobernanza son fundamentales para la implementación del apéndice 2 de las CITES para las especies arbóreas, sobre todo para los países que somos principales productores, siendo el manejo forestal y la generación de cadenas productivas sostenibles de los productos forestales relevantes para la puesta en valor y conservación de los bosques en beneficio de las poblaciones locales. Por lo expuesto, apoyamos la continuación del programa, las decisiones propuestas en el anexo 1 por la Secretaría y también la enmienda realizada por Guatemala. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Peru. I now give the floor to Burundi, followed by Cameroon, then Nigeria.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et comme le Burundi prend la parole pour la première fois, je me joins aux autres nations pour remercier le Panama pour l'accueil hospitalier qui nous a été réservé, ainsi que le secrétariat CITES pour nous avoir permis la participation à cette COP. Le Burundi a bénéficié des fonds dans ce programme pour l'élaboration d'un ACP pour le Plénis africain. Et l'ACP a été soumis au secrétariat de la CITES. Nous remercions sincèrement Mme Elodie et Dr Betty Lagarde pour nous avoir accompagnés dans tout le processus. Nous souhaitons que ce programme puisse s'étendre aux autres espèces telles que l'Osiris lanceolata et de valoriser les acquis du premier ACP pour le Plénis africain. Nous soutenons donc les propositions de décision fournies par le secrétariat CITES. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Burundi. I give the floor to Cameroon, followed by Nigeria, then Kenya.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je profite encore de cette occasion pour vous adresser nos encouragements pour la manière avec laquelle vous conduisez les travaux de ce comité. Le Cameroun a été bénéficiaire de ce programme depuis sa première phase. Et bien plus, dans cette phase actuelle, c'est un de ses compatriotes, le professeur Betty Lagarde, qui a été désigné comme le coordinateur régional de ce programme pour l'Afrique. Nous nous en félicitons pour cela. Maintenant, pour l'activité du Cameroun, des questions d'élaborer un avis de commerce non plugeable sur le Prunus africana. Les activités ont été menées, les études ont été conduites. Nous espérons qu'au terme de tout ce processus, l'espace économique sera de nouveau ouvert pour les opérateurs économiques de cette filière. Monsieur le Président, pendant la durée de ce programme, les acteurs se sont rendus compte que le suivi des espèces CITES coûte cher. Et dorénavant, avec le nombre assez élevé de ces espèces-là, nos États auront beaucoup de difficultés. C'est pour cette raison que nous saluons encore cette initiative, nous encourageons tous les acteurs. Nous disons à ceux qui avaient déjà été là, l'Union européenne, le secteur de la CITES, de continuer leurs efforts, et bien plus, comme à la première phase, d'envisager d'associer les opérateurs économiques privés, comme avec l'OEBT. Et c'est pour cette raison que le Cameroun va faire une petite proposition d'amendement de la décision 19 dans le point A, dans le 19BB dans le point A, peut-être en termes de mots français, c'est différent. Nous disons que élabore et met en œuvre un programme de développement des capacités. C'est l'observation que nous faisons à ce point A, que ça soit écrit comme tel. Et maintenant, au point C, nous voulons bien ajouter l'apport des opérateurs économiques privés. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
So, Cameroon, could you just read out exactly how you would want 19BBA to read in full, just to make sure we've got your intention correctly? And you wanted to insert private actors, I think, into 19BBC. If you could just tell us precisely where you wanted that. So if you could just repeat those insertions, please.
Merci encore, Monsieur le Président. Nous avons, au niveau de la décision 19BB, échangé le terme renforcement par le terme développement des capacités. Peut-être il y a une nuance pertinente en français. Et maintenant, au niveau C, nous pensons qu'il est bon de prescrire les opérateurs économiques privés. Parce qu'à la première phase, ce programme a eu cette expérience. Donc, nous voulons bien que ceci soit pris en compte. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Cameroon. Just to make sure I'd captured that correctly. I give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Kenya, then Chile, then Canada. That's the end of our list. And I'm not taking any more interventions from parties. So Nigeria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to join my voice with other parties to say immensely Nigeria also benefited from this program. There are so many lessons that were learned, in terms of conducting NDF, particularly on terror capos, in which some time ago Nigeria had some issues, in being suspended, and we are hopeful that very, very soon this suspension will be lifted. So our capacity has been built on this NDF, and also want to extend our thanks to the EU, for funding this project, and also the Secretariat for the coordinating this activity. And also want to say that we agree with all the recommendations that have been made, particularly the one that said the project should continue. We want to also join our voice to say, please, let this program continue. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Nigeria. I give the floor to Kenya, then Chile, then Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kenya would like to thank the CITES Secretariat for preparing document CoP19.20 on the CITES Tree Species Program, and for the immense support provided by the Secretariat team to the parties during the implementation of this program. Mr. Chair, the CITES Tree Species Program has supported a tripartite project on the conservation and sustainable management of East African sandalwood, the Osiris lanceolata, for economic development in East Africa, which has been jointly implemented by Kenya together with Uganda and the United Republic of Tanzania. This project has contributed immensely towards the implementation of decisions 18.14 through 18.17 through production of tangible results that have enhanced the management and the conservation of Osiris lanceolata, through generation of data and document findings, formulation, capacity building, and improved intergovernmental and interinstitutional collaborations and the coordination in regard to research and the management of the species. The partner states, Mr. Chair, have enjoyed different levels of synergy and the peer-to-peer learning by sharing prior experiences and lessons learned. Mr. Chair, it is important that the three countries continue to engage in research and capacity building activities in the longer term, with an emphasis to extend beyond the current project period as a permanent collaborative program of the CITES Secretariat, EU, and ITTO. In this respect, we consider that parties need longer-term, coherent, and comprehensive technical and financial support to enhance capacities to implement the convention. We therefore support the recommendations in document CoP19.20 and the draft decisions as contained in Annex 1, and Mr. Chair, with the amendments proposed by USA to include an additional draft decision, CC, which is directed to the Standing Committee and the Plans Committee. Mr. Chair, it will be the desire of Kenya, and we believe of other parties, especially in Africa, to see the CITES Tree Species Program becoming a permanent program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. I give the floor to Chile, then Canada. Thank you.
Gracias, señor presidente. Por ser nuestra primera intervención, primero felicitarlo por su nombramiento y desearle el mejor de los éxitos en su presidencia. Igualmente felicitar al país anfitrión por el estupendo organización de esta conferencia de las partes, la segunda después en América después de la que organizó Chile el año 2002. Para nosotros consideramos muy importante la mantención de este programa de especies arbóreas en el tiempo, mantenerlo, dado que es un gran aporte para efectos de generación de capacidades, elaboración de dictámenes no perjudiciales, trazabilidad, legalidad. Aunque Chile no fue beneficiario en directo en términos de las especies que estuvieron involucradas, sí estamos muy conscientes del gran aporte para la conservación, para el manejo forestal sostenible y por lo tanto nosotros apoyamos el proyecto de decisión presentado por la Secretaría con la enmienda propuesta por Guatemala. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you. And the final party on my list, Canada, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Chair. Canada congratulates the Secretariat and all of the involved parties and partners on the productivity and success of the CITES tree species program. Canada has concerns with the inclusion of the words "and forests" at the conclusion of Draft Decision 19 BB, paragraph a. We believe this reference reduces clarity as to the potential focus and scope of the proposed capacity building program. We would prefer the words "and forests" be deleted from the draft decision or any proposed amendment to the decision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. I will see, may take one, possibly two observer interventions if there is any desire. And I see ITTO, and ITTO, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be brief. ITTO has been providing support to countries to implement listings for tropical tree species for almost 30 years, and we were involved in the CTSP since its inception after running a similar program through ITTO for a decade. Our involvement included from the start helping to identify the regional coordinators, to review the proposals that came in, sit on the advisory committee and carry out a range of activities, some of which we'll be hearing about under other agenda items at this COP. Mainly, I wanted to address my comments to the future of this kind of work, which we've already talked about in a side event yesterday that was very well attended. This phase of the CTSP will be ending with the big funding from the EU finishing up this year, but certainly the collaboration to implement listings of species, of tree species in CITES needs to continue, and ITTO will be continuing that collaboration with CITES. As we heard from the US, donors continue to provide funding through ITTO for our work on assisting countries to implement the tree species listings for tropical countries, and that will continue. We have a standing biennial work program activity to carry out this kind of work, and we're currently funding a number of activities in countries like Ecuador, Cameroon, and Madagascar, focused specifically on CITES species. In addition to this, we have a large project program focusing on forest governance and forest law enforcement improvement with activities like timber tracking, which, while not directed specifically at CITES-listed species, certainly contributes to the better management and control of those species along with other tropical timber species. So to finish up, Mr. Chair, ITTO will be liaising with the CITES Secretariat after this COP when we see the outcomes, which could include a number of new species being listed, tree species being listed, as we've heard, to see how we can make effective use of the limited funding that we have available to try to help some of the outcomes from this COP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ITTO. I'm just going to take a few moments to check that my record of the suggested amendments is the same as the Secretariat have captured, and then I'll come back and sum up. Thank you. Right, thank you, colleagues, and apologies for the slight delay. I was just trying to make sure that we had everything captured. So going through the various amendments that we had, starting with 19 BBA, I think Cameroon have raised an issue, which I think is probably a translation issue, which and how words are used between English and French, and I think we can capture that and adjust it. So we will be talking about development of a capacity building program, covering all relevant regions and so on. Canada suggested deletion of forests, and that can be done easily. Of course, a major difference with regards to 19 BBA on 19 BBA is that the United States suggested the deletion of that paragraph, as I understand. And I'd probably, like to go back to the US. I didn't hear any other parties asking for its deletion in its entirety. And I think a lot of parties implied support for retaining it. So United States, could you let me know how strongly you feel about that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And as you note, there was overwhelming support for retention of these elements in the draft decisions. And to be clear, we very much support capacity building efforts on CITES listed tree species. So noting the support, our concern was with regard to the involvement of the Plans Committee and the Standing Committee in the development of any such capacity building program. So I think our concerns would be solved if the words "as needed" were deleted from paragraph 19.BB, paragraph B. And then I think with that minor amendment, we would withdraw our suggestion for an additional draft decision. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, United States, and thank you for your cooperation. That's helpful. So with the deletion of as needed from 19 BBB, you wouldn't then require your additional paragraph at the end. That's fine. So we then have in 19 BBB, again, the insertion from Guatemala, which was supported by quite a number of parties, which would read then seek advice and guidance from the plants and the standing committees, and to assess the potential for the CITES tree species program becoming a permanent program. And there was significant support for that, so I think we can go forward with that. In 19 BBC, late in the paragraph, after the Collaborative Partnership on Forests, CPF, we would insert "and private economic actors," I think was the language suggested by Cameroon. So I think with that, we would delete "and forests" from 19 BBA, as Canada has requested. I think that encapsulates all the amendments, yes, which leaves the only final thing to conclude on this is to agree the deletion of decisions 1814 to 1817 as these have now been implemented. So with that, I think we can close this agenda item. Thank you for your cooperation. And we will now move on to item 62 on agar wood producing taxa. We have two documents in front of us, and given that they both relate to the same issue, I suggest we introduce them in turn, and then I would open debate on both. So with document 62.1, I invite the chair of the Plants Committee. She's here to take the floor. and introduce the document, you press your button and so Gabon, you have the floor.
Okay.
Merci.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. À sa 18e session, la conférence des parties a adopté la décision 18-203 à l'adresse du Comité pour les plantes pour le suivi de la mise en œuvre de la résolution CONF 1610, application de la Convention aux taxons produisant du bois d'agar, afin d'évaluer tous les impacts potentiels de la conservation sur la survie à long terme des espèces produisant du bois d'agar et les problèmes éventuels découlant de la mise en œuvre. Ce suivi se traduit par des actions à conduire et sont spécifiées dans les alinéas I à 3I du paragraphe A de la décision. Sur la base des conclusions du groupe de travail sur les taxons produisant du bois d'agar établi par le Comité pour les plantes, le Comité pour les plantes a convenu, entre autres, de reporter l'examen des éventuelles révisions à apporter au glossaire sur le bois d'agar et aux lignes directrices pour la formulation d'avis de commerce non préjudiciable relatifs au bois d'agar à la prochaine période intersession. De prendre note des besoins en matériel d'identification et de la nécessité de renforcer les capacités et de fournir des orientations sur les avis d'acquisition légale, y compris sur la chaîne de contrôle en ce qui concerne les spécimens des taxons produisant du bois d'agar, Aquilaria species et Gynops species. De soumettre le projet de décision suivant pour examen à la COP19. Aussi, Monsieur le Président, le Comité pour les plantes invite la conférence des parties à adopter le projet de décision figurant à l'annexe 1 du document COP19 DOC 62.1. Je fais maintenant lecture de ce projet de décision qui est à l'adresse du Comité pour les plantes. Décision 19.AA. Le Comité pour les plantes, avec l'aide du secrétariat, petit a, examine les éventuelles révisions à apporter à la résolution CONF 16.10, application de la Convention aux taxons produisant du bois d'agar, en tenant compte des autres résolutions pertinentes, y compris la résolution CONF 10.13, application de la Convention aux espèces d'arbres, le cas échéant. Petit b, formule toute recommandation appropriée concernant le glossaire sur le bois d'agar et les lignes directrices pour la formulation d'avis de commerce non préjudiciable ACNP relatifs au bois d'agar et, petit c, fait des recommandations pour examen à la 20e session de la conférence des parties. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Plants Committee Chair. And we'll open debate in a moment, but I'm now going to invite the United Kingdom to introduce document 62.2 on the history and challenges of agar wood and CITES. United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The UK is pleased to introduce document 62.2, the history and challenges of agar wood and CITES. There was a clearly recognized need for this document, which summarizes all available information regarding agar wood and CITES into one place. During the writing of the document, discussions were held with parties as well as academic researchers and agar wood specialists. Several key recommendations were made, which are listed at the end of the document. These include the need for the review of the standard CITES nomenclature for Aquilaria and Gynops, practical tools and techniques for accurate identification of agar wood products at country borders, and a survey of the size and status of wild populations of agar wood species to aid in NDFs and IUCN Red List assessments. Collectively, these will help ensure implementation of CITES for agar wood and will contribute to the recommendations 5 identified in PC 25 COM 7. Furthermore, we would like to acknowledge the review submitted by the Secretariat on behalf of ITTO on Agarwood and note that many of the recommendations within InfoDoc 12 align with those in our document 62.2. We would urge parties to include these important recommendations in future work on agarwood to ensure the conservation and sustainable trade of agarwood producing species. This is the end of my introduction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Kingdom. So with that, I open the floor for comments. Again, recognizing that our time is limited, I ask people to be brief and to focus their comments on Annex 1 of 62.1 and the draft decisions in front of us. But the floor is open. I see China followed by the European Union. You have the floor, China.
Thank you, Chair. China notes the Secretariat's comments and proposed a new text to the draft decisions in Annex 1 to Doc 62.1. We agree that the potential revisions to the resolutions should be reported to the Standing Committee and therefore support the new paragraph 90.bb that Secretariat drafted. China also supports that the resolution COP 1111 on regulation of trade in plants be taken into account. For paragraph B of the Secretariat's comments reviewing additional developments since the 25th meeting of the Plants Committee, we here remind that China completed and submitted a review about the definition of artificially propagated of CITES-listed tree species, which is directly related to the potential revision of these three resolutions and serve the current draft decision 19.AA. We recommend that the Plans Committee also refer to the CoP19 information document 15 when implementing the decisions. In this regard, China requests that the Secretariat's revised text be added in 15. The revised paragraph reads like this. I will read slowly. 19.AA, the Plans Committee shall, with the assistance of the Secretariat, review document CoP19, Doc 62.2, and information document CoP19 Inf 12 and CoP19 Inf 15, and etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you, China. I now give the floor to the European Union, followed by Kuwait. You have the floor, EU.
Thank you, Chair. I speak for the EU and its member states. The EU welcomes the ongoing process of reviewing the implementation of CITES for agarwood species and the potential revision of Resolution Conf 1610 on implementation of the Convention for agarwood producing taxa. We also very much appreciate the reviews provided by the UK in CoP19 Doc 62.2 and CoP19 in 5 and by the ITTO in CoP19 in 12, which are very helpful and relevant to update and improve the understanding of agarwood production and trade and of the implementation of CITES for species of Aquilaria and Gyronops. These documents do also recall the still existing and even growing concerns regarding the ongoing decline of wild populations of agarwood species and issues to implement effective conservation and sustainable use of agarwood taxa. The EU emphasizes the need to take information from CoP19 Doc 62.2, the proposed research therein, and of information documents CoP19 in 5 and in 12 into account when revising Resolution Conf 1610. We therefore support the recommendations of the Secretariat to consider the findings of the documents and future research in the review process of Resolution Conf 1610. In the same sense, we support the Secretariat's amendments to draft decisions 19AA, paragraph a, that adds Resolution Conf 1111 on a regulation of trade in plants as an additional reference for potential revisions of Resolution Conf 1610. Based on this, the EU supports the draft decisions in CoP19 Doc 62.1 only in the amended version by the Secretariat. However, the EU also wants to make clear that it is our critical interest that Resolution Conf 1013 on implementation of the Convention for Tree Species and Resolution Conf 1111 on regulation of trade in plants must not be weakened regarding definitions and specifications of artificial propagation during the processes proposed in CoP19 Doc 62.1. We consider the specifications for agarwood taxa and Resolution Conf 1610 as an exemption from otherwise expedient regulations for artificial propagation of tree species in other resolutions, which should be maintained. Further on, we emphasize the option to use source code Y for assisted production as the appropriate code to implement CITES in those cases that do not fit within the strict definitions of artificial propagation laid out in Resolution Conf 1013 and 1111, but that are not wild-sourced either. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I now give the floor to Kuwait, followed by the United Arab Emirates, followed by Saudi Arabia. Kuwait, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to document 62.1, I would like to thank the Plant Committee in preparing this document, and I would like to support the draft decision in paragraph D that proposed, the modified proposed by the CITES Secretariat, specifically the work to improve the agarwood glossary, as we believe the information should be updated. Kuwait looking forward to support the work of the Plant Committee in this matter. With regard to document 62.2, I would like to thank the United Kingdom of Great Britain and North Ireland in complying and preparing this document and valuable information on agarwood species. Kuwait, as a reservation country, but also submit all data of import and re-export in the CITES annual report. I see some of the out-of-date information and inconsistent in the information provided in this document and in number 5. So looking forward as well to work with the CITES Secretariat and the Plant Committee to provide further information on this matter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kuwait. I give the floor to the United Arab Emirates, followed by Saudi Arabia and Bahrain.
Thank you, Chair. Since the UAE is taking the floor in the Committee 1 for the first time, we would like to take this opportunity to congratulate you on chairing this committee and to thank the government of Panama for their welcoming and great hospitality of COP19. The UAE would like to thank the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland for the preparation of this document. The UAE implements the CITES provision and national legislation on the trade of any species of agarwood despite the reservation of this species. It's required by legislation in the UAE to have CITES permit of importing, exporting, or re-exporting of agarwood and its derivative. The UAE takes all necessary actions from registration of traders and all the way to border control. Based on the document 62.2, it states there is a lack of information and data from countries with the reservation, which includes the UAE. However, the UAE have been submitting data of import and re-export of agarwood to CITES Secretariat for the CITES database, which was used to prepare the reflection in the information document number 5. This is contradictory to what we see in this document. The UAE would like to highlight the fact that a lot of information we see in some of the document does not reflect the situation on the ground, and we would like the information to be verified. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, United Arab Emirates. I go now to Saudi Arabia, then Bahrain.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to document 62.2, we would like to highlight the conservation efforts for agri-wood species. Saudi Arabia has developed several measures to regulate trade in wildlife and plant species and drive reducing for illegal trade in wildlife and plant species, which align with the trade challenges. We organized workshops and collected data on trade between exports and import countries to help us to control illegal trade and enhance our enforcement efforts to conserve agri-wood. Saudi Arabia also has taken several measures to regulate trade in wildlife and reducing demand related to illegal trade in agri-wood. Saudi Arabia also has recently launched a comprehensive electronic platform aimed at reaching 40 electronic services, most of which are related to trade in plant and species, wildlife, and its products. We also expanded our work to combat wildlife crimes. We established recently a new division on electronic wildlife crimes in a step to enhance the role of Saudi Arabia to control such crimes. We also expanded our land and sea inspection to control trafficking in species, wildlife, and their product. Saudi Arabia also launched a national initiative to develop a system of trade in wildlife, one of outputs of which is the expansion of control through land and sea and airport. These several measures will reflect positively on trade, and we will also lead a sustainable conservation of wildlife and its products, such as agri-wood species. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Saudi Arabia. I now see Bahrain, followed by Indonesia. Bahrain, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Bahrain would like to express support for the Secretariat's proposed modified draft decisions presented in document 62.1. Bahrain would like to especially support the Secretariat's modification to 19.AA small b. From our experience in using the glossary, we note the potential for improvements and updates in unifying and clarifying the terms across the languages the glossary has been translated into, as well as reviewing the HS codes. And so Bahrain would like to express interest in aiding with the potential revision of the glossary of agri-wood products. Thank you.
Thank you, Bahrain. I now turn to Indonesia, and then United Kingdom has requested the floor also. So Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia has concerns which are similar to China, and thus in the doc INF 15 need to be considered. And Indonesia also appreciates United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland for preparing the document 62.2. There are researcher activities progressing for agarwood in Indonesia despite of all limitations along its way. The activities are involving and supported by relevant stakeholders within the country that is expected to provide accuracy information on its production and trade, addressing questions as also described in this document. We welcome parties that might be willing to share findings and support to ensure the sustainability of agarwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia. I give the floor to the United Kingdom. You've got additional points to make.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us the floor for the second time. The United Kingdom thanks the Plant Committee for all their work on agar-wood producing taxa since CoP18. We support the CITES Secretariat's edits to the draft decisions for 19.AA Part A and Part C and 19.BB. We consider a joint review of CoP19 Doc 62.2 and Information Document 12 to be useful. However, the United Kingdom supports the original wording for 19.AA Part B proposed by the Plants Committee. We think before improving uptake of the agar-wood glossary, there should be a review of the glossary and any changes required made first. Regarding document 62.2, we welcome discussions with parties and learning more about the available data. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. I will now open the floor to any observers who wish to comment. ITTO, I see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to take the floor to again highlight that ITTO prepared document INF 12 as part under the CITES tree species program, and that that document was validated in a workshop held in Malaysia in June with about 50 to 60 AgriWood experts participating in person and online, and including the representative of the UK who worked on the report in document 62.2. So certainly ITTO is very happy to hear the strong support from parties to revise the draft decision as proposed by the Secretariat to take account of these two documents, which I think add a lot of useful information. In the case of the document produced by ITTO, there are very concrete recommendations on many aspects of agarwood cultivation and production, both in plantations and in the wild, and including concrete recommendations for revisions to the agarwood glossary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, ITTO. I will just take a moment to consult with the Secretariat. I'll be with you shortly. Thank you, colleagues. So to sum up, there was a lot of support for the Secretariat amendments, with the exception that the UK just made, that they would like to keep the original formulation of 19AA paragraph B. In the opening chapeau to 19AA, there was also support for reviewing document CoP19 Doc 62.2 and information documents CoP19 INF 12 and INF 15. And I think with that, there were no further changes. And clearly, parties also welcome document 62.2 and the information it provided. Perhaps we can note that for the record. Do we have decisions? And we also need to delete decisions 18203 and 18204. So I think with that, that concludes our discussion on item 62 on agar wood, and we will now move on to document 63 on Boswellia trees. And again, I will invite the chair of the Plants Committee to introduce this, and I give the floor to Gabon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. En sa 25e session, le Comité pour les plantes a établi un groupe de travail en vue de mettre en œuvre les décisions 18.205 à 18.208 relatives aux espèces de Boswellia, en particulier la décision 18.207. Ce groupe de travail avait pour mandat de débattre des plus importantes lacunes dans les connaissances sur les espèces de Boswellia de proposer des recommandations portant sur l'utilisation durable et de la conservation de ces espèces et d'examiner la question de savoir si l'une ou l'autre des espèces Bosselua pourrait répondre aux critères d'inscription aux annexes de la CITES. Différentes recommandations ont ainsi été formulées et sont présentées aux alinéas A à I du paragraphe 6 du document COP19 DOC 63. Le Comité pour les plantes a préparé des projets de décision et invite la conférence des parties à les adopter. Les projets de décision sont les suivants. À l'adresse du secrétariat 19AA, le secrétariat partage l'information reçue du consultant sur Bosselua species et toute autre information communiquée par les parties et parties prenantes avec le Comité pour les plantes, notamment pour ce qui concerne l'identification des espèces de Bosselua et les éventuelles espèces ressemblantes et les espèces et spécimens commercialisés, ainsi que les volumes du commerce de spécimens de Bosselua. Le secrétariat détermine également les réunions ou autres occasions permettant de collaborer ou de partager des informations relatives au prélèvement et à la gestion de ces espèces. À l'adresse du Comité pour les plantes, 19.bb, le Comité pour les plantes examine l'information disponible soumise au secrétariat et les lacunes dans les connaissances identifiées dans le document PC25 DOC 25 sur Bosselua species afin d'étayer de possibles propositions d'inscription d'espèces de Bosselua, y compris l'examen d'annotations appropriées conformes aux orientations figurant dans la résolution Conf 11.21 REV COP 18. Utilisation des annotations dans les annexes 1 et 2. À l'adresse des parties, 19CC, les États et parties de l'aire de répartition sont encouragés à fournir des informations au secrétariat, comme mentionné dans la décision 19AA, et sont encouragés à envisager d'inscrire à l'annexe 3 les espèces de Bosselua dont ils sont les États de l'aire de répartition, si ces espèces satisfont aux dispositions de l'article 16 de la Convention et à la résolution Conf 9.25 REV COP 18, application de la Convention aux espèces de l'annexe 2. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Chair of the Plants Committee. So I now open the floor for comments from parties. And I see Switzerland, you have the floor, followed by India.
Thank you, Chair. We appreciate document DOC 63 on Boswellia trees and thank the Plants Committee for submitting it. Switzerland chaired the in-session working group at PC25 in June 2021. And the outcome of the fruitful discussion is reflected in document 63, paragraph 6A to I. The draft decisions in Annex 1 to the present document were based on the knowledge available at the time of that meeting. The study commissioned by the Secretariat in November 2021 was published in October 2022 as an INF-Doc 10 and is a comprehensive document. We fully support the Secretariat's comments and amendments to the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 to the document CoP19 DOC 63. However, further study to inform decision-making regarding this genus is considered necessary, and I would like to draw attention to a 2-year research project funded by Switzerland on conservation status, trade and threats to the genus Boswellia, led by the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh, and an overview of which is available in INF-Doc 72. Representatives of the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh are present at the conference and would be happy to discuss the project further and engage with interested stakeholders. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland. And I give the floor to Kenya. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kenya would like to thank the Plants Committee for preparing CoP19 Doc 63 on Boswellia tree species. Kenya is a range state for Boswellia and has ongoing national initiatives to address concerns regarding the conservation and management of the species. Kenya submitted information in accordance to Decision 18208 and as requested through notification to the parties number 2020/010. Of particular concern to Kenya were gaps in knowledge, issues of look-alike, and sustainable harvest of many species for international trade, and concern for fate of communities who depend on these species. Subsequently, Kenya participated in PC25, the working group on Boswellia, and was a co-leader for the implementation of Decision 18207 on Boswellia trees. Kenya provided further information to the consultant commissioned by the Secretariat to undertake additional research on specific aspects of Decision 18205, which were not yet covered by the information presented in document PC25 Doc 25. Mr. Chair, Kenya supports adoption of the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 to this document and as amended by the Secretariat.
Thank you, Kenya. There was a time when my screen was showing some blank rows, and these have now all been filled in, which is why I didn't announce a longer list. But apparently, it's important that parties sit in the right seat and insert the card in the right place, otherwise it doesn't recognize your card properly, if that was the problem. Anyway, I now have a complete list that I can look at. So next on my list is Somalia, followed by India and the United States.
Thanks, Chair, to give me the floor. Somalia is one of the countries that found in Boswellia tree. In north regions of Somalia have a lot of Boswellia tree that release a precious gums that we export to outside. These type of gums were used to produce for perfumes and medicines. Somalia has a large challenges that people met during the time of working for the Boswellia tree. Somalia still uses the old methods of production of Boswellia. This tree is important for our use as a Somali people. It's an export, a precious export that Somalis used to export for outside. The request to be enlisted in Annex 3 will hurt the production of the Somalis. So we have a concern. The business and exportation of the Boswellia tree will not develop if we enlist this precious tree in Annex 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Somalia. India, you have the floor, followed by United States, then Ethiopia, and I'll maybe close the list there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. India had submitted its response to the questionnaire on Boswellia and had also participated in the discussions regarding these trees during PC 25. India is a range state for Boswellia serrata and Boswellia ovalifoliolata. Boswellia serrata is abundant and well managed in the country, and the Indian population of the species does not meet the criteria for listing in any of the CITES appendices. The extraction of oleoresin from Boswellia serrata is an important livelihood activity for rural, tribal, and poor communities. It is being artificially propagated in the country with success. The practices being used for extraction of oleoresin also do not result in destruction of the trees. In our submission to the Plants Committee, we had emphasized that any contemplation of a genus-level listing for Boswellia is premature and should not be considered. It would have a negative effect on livelihoods and would not necessarily result in positive outcomes for conservation of these species. We therefore welcome the recommendations in the CoP19 Inf.10 Rev 1 which support this view. We urge the parties and the Plants Committee to focus on identification of Boswellia specimens in trade and only consider CITES listings of those species which meet the listing criteria and for which listings would have a positive conservation outcome. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. We're coming up to the end of our program time here. I'm just going to ask the interpreters if they could perhaps give us another 5-10 minutes to finish this agenda item. Okay, thank you for your indulgence. Give the floor to the United States, followed by Ethiopia. And given the time, clearly I would appreciate your brevity. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Noting that the consultant's report on Boswellia species has now been received, we support the Secretariat's recommendation in its comments that the report be shared with the Plants Committee for its review. With regard to the instruction in Draft Decision 19AA, directing the Secretariat to identify other meetings and venues that might provide opportunities for sharing the information and collaborating, our preference would be for those suggestions to be provided to the Plants Committee for its review and development of recommendations before the Secretariat takes additional action. Therefore, we recommend that an additional direction to that effort be included in Draft Decision 19BB. Also, with regard to Draft Decision 19BB, in addition to using the consultant's report to inform possible listing proposals for Boswellia species, we believe that it will be important to identify if further gaps remain and whether additional information would be needed in order to determine the need for listing proposals, and if so, the scope. Finally, although the United States is not a range state for Boswellia species, we believe that this work represents an important proactive exercise in identifying the impacts of international trade on species of wild flora and considering the benefits of inclusion in the CITES appendices. We also believe that this approach provides an opportunity to support collaboration among range, transit, and consumer states and with the Plants Committee to review the science and trade in these ecologically and economically important species. The United States was pleased to be able to provide the funding for the consultancy and looks forward to continuing work with all relevant stakeholders in considering the conservation of Boswellia. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. I think you suggested you would like some words put into 19BB, if I remember correctly. Could you give us some text for that so that we have something tangible in front of us? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We would suggest that the issue of identifying other appropriate venues for outreach to seek input on the study should be referred to the Plants Committee to help inform that effort. Not helpful.
Okay, thank you, United States. I think we've got you now, really. You're wanting the last sentence in 19AA to be moved to become a new kind of task directed to the Plants Committee under 19BB. So it will then become the Plants Committee shall also identify. Right, so we've got that and we can insert that. We've got no other requests from the floor, thankfully. And given the time, I'm not going to invite comments from observers. With regret, I apologize for that. I think we've heard a number of interventions. Most have supported the draft decisions, including the Secretariat amendments with the changes proposed by the United States and reference, of course, to the correct INF document 10. I think Switzerland, you made a comment about information document 72 that is available. Were you intending that to be kind of reflected in the decisions as well, or?
Not really. No. I don't get, it's not necessary.
Okay. That's perfect. That's thank you. We just wanted to be clear. So I think that concludes the issue here. And I think we need to, do we need to delete any decisions? Yes, we do. We need to delete decisions 18205 to 208. So with that, I can conclude debate on this topic for now. And we can, unless there are Secretariat announcements. Yes, there are. So Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Three announcements about working groups. The budget working group will be meeting tomorrow, Thursday, at 12:15 in Pacifico 1. Budget working group tomorrow, 12:15 in Pacifico 1, and they will be reviewing the language strategy. So Arabic, Chinese, and Russian-speaking delegates are invited to attend that meeting of the budget working group. The working group on item 23 on zoonotic diseases will be meeting tomorrow at 12:15 in room ISTMO 1. ISTMO 1 tomorrow, 12:15 for the working group on item 23, zoonotic diseases. And lastly, the drafting group on item 88 on communications concerning amendments to the appendices received by the depository government after COP18 will be meeting today in room ISMO 2 at 5:30. So that's item 88, today, ISMO 2 at 5:30. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and with special thanks to the interpreters for their indulgence in staying on a little longer. We will announce information on the working groups we set up yesterday when we come back after the lunch break. So please enjoy the break and hope to see you back promptly at 2. Thank you.